Hello viewers, my name is Damilari. In this lesson we'll be looking at the topic levels of organization of life and complexity. Levels of organization of life and complexity. This talks about how life moves from one level to another before it gets to the complex, the highest level. So starting with the first level where we have cell. What is cell? Unit of life. That means the beginning of life, under which we have the unicellular, meaning one cell. Example, amoeba is unicellular. We also have euglena. Then multicellular, those ones that have many cells, like spirogyra is multicellular. So there are still many other cells that we can find out in our body, like red blood cell, the egg, the sperm, and so on. So that leads us to the second level of organization, which we call tissue. Tissue is a group of cells. So the cell we just talked about now, if we combine them together, we have tissue. So group of cells, that's our tissue. And they will perform the same structure and function. So group of cells of the same structure and function. Now looking at tissues, there are examples of tissues in plants like xylem, phloem, epidermal tissue, they are in plants. Then tissues in animals, we have bones, cartilage, and so on. But when it comes to types of tissue, there is a way you can get types of tissue. You can take this letter C, M, E, and N. What does that mean? You can call it semen. You call it semen. So when I say semen, meaning C for connective, M for muscular, E for epithelium, then the N for nervous, semen. So these are the types of tissue. Now looking at the C, that's connective. Example of connective tissues, they are the bones. The bones are connected and helping us to move our body. Then M, that's the muscular, so the tissues in our muscle. Then the E, the epithelium. So this epithelium, they are in our skin, the tissues in our skin. Then the N, the nervous tissue, that's the ones that are in our brain and spinal cord. So another thing is, if you want to know more, talking about the usefulness of tissue, that means what is tissue doing in our body, you can break it down using these letters TISSUE to know what tissue is doing in our body. The T means transport, like the blood. The blood is a tissue, just as it is a cell, it's also a tissue, so it can transport. Then I is insulation, like fat. The fat in our body, like the one they call adipose, so it can do the work of insulation, that means preventing heat. Then S, that's support, meaning there are some tissues in our body that are supporting, like the connective tissues, like the bone, it can support. Another S is sensation. Some tissues are for sensation in our body, like the nervous tissue. Talking about the brain, they are sensitive, the brain and the spinal cord. Then U, utility, that means doing many works, that means uses. Example is the epithelia. So epithelia can do many work, like the epithelia, we find it in our skin. So from the skin we can see absorption, that means the skin can absorb and it can also secrete, so that's for utility. Then E, the tissue can do the work of exchange. For example, when you look at that same epithelia, which is the skin, the tissue can exchange certain substances in our body. So that is for the second level of organization, which we call tissue. And that leads us to the third level, which we call organ. What is organ? Organ is a group of tissue, meaning that when we bring tissues together, we have our organ. So group of tissue, and they will have the same size, shape, functions. For example, in a plant, roots is an organ, stem is an organ, leaves, they are organs in plants. Then for animals, eyes, ears, nose, they are all organs, including the kidney, the liver. All of these are organs in our body. That leads us to the fourth level of organization of life. Don't forget, organization of life means they are arranging life, they are putting together to bring about complex being from the smaller being to a complex one. So the fourth level of organization is the system. What do we have in the system? That's first thing, system is a group of organs. So if you want to remember, always check the previous. So the previous will tell you the definition. So groups of organ for the specific function, that means they are doing a specific function, like the digestive system, the circulatory system, the excretory system. So all of these are higher level. Remember, I said they are moving from the lowest level, the cell, followed by the tissue, the organ, and finally the system. So if you want to remember these things we have mentioned from here, the cell, the tissue, organ, and the system, just say CTOS. That's CTOS. These are the levels of organization of life: cell, tissue, organ, system. And this will lead us to what we call complexity. So this complexity is the second part of this study, where we look at complexity of organization in higher organisms. What is the meaning of the word complex? When you say something is complex, what does that mean? So it's a gradual process from unicellular to multicellular. That means higher level. So higher level. Complex is something that is high, that is great, that's the things inside it are much. So complexity is in a gradual process from unicellular to multicellular. Like we started with amoeba, unicellular, but once we come to multicellular, like human being, so human being is complex. And another thing is there is no definite nuclear material when it comes to bacteria. Talking about the unicellular now, no nuclear material. But once you move to the complex one, like the prokaryotes, so you will see good nuclear material. So talking about how complexity is having higher substances. So another thing is development of plants. When you look at our plants, we have some, they don't have seed, they call them seedless, and then we have those ones that have seed, meaning that there is complexity from a low level, which is the one without seed, to higher level, which is the one that have seed. So another one is animals. We have animals that are small, we have animals that do not have backbone, and then we now have the ones that are bigger and the ones that have backbone, meaning that there is a development from small animals to a big animal, then from those ones that do not have backbone to those ones that have backbone. So talking about the levels of organization of life, so to the point of complexity. Now man is the most complex. That means we have all the features that small animals do not have. So talking about the levels of organization of life. Now, as I'm rounding off this study, we'll be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of this complexity. So like I said, man is a complex being. When I say complex, that means they have all the features that the smaller organisms do not have. So they are complex. So what are the advantages of this complexity as it is in human? In human, their cells are specialized. That means if you look at human being, assuming this is human being here, so each cell, the cell in the eyes, in the nose, in our hands, each of them, they are doing special function. So that's cell specialization. Also division of labor, just like I said, each of them is specialized. The same way each of them is doing different work. So one organ or one cell will not be doing the work of other cells. So they divided the work. So the work of eye is different from the work of nose. So they divide their work for what? Efficiency. Another thing, better adaptation. Because organisms have many parts, so they can adapt. That means as it's trying to use this a part to adapt to something, it will use another part to adapt to another thing. So for better adaptation, that means assuming they don't have all these things, so they will be limited in adaptation. Then finally, organisms increase in size. So when it comes to complexity, it means for an organism to become complex, it will be increasing in size. So that leads us to disadvantages. So what are now the disadvantages of this complexity. That means for human we are complex, but that complexity, all those things that are in our body that made us complex, what are now the side effects? Number one, in terms of space, there is no enough space in our body, like where the kidney is, the liver, they have all covered our body, such that if you open human body, there will be no space. So but if it is small organisms, there are space. So if there are space in small organism, that's what we call surface area relative to volume ratio. So that's SAV. For small organism, their own SAV, surface area to volume, is large, meaning that there is enough space in small organism. But for complex organism like human being, so our own SAV would have decreased. It would have decreased, meaning that we have a low surface area to volume ratio, meaning that there is no enough space in our body. Looking at all these small organisms like insects and the likes, like the bacteria and the amoeba, so they have enough space, and that's why they can do diffusion. They can diffuse. That means trying to squeeze out some things from their body. So diffusion. So but for complex organism like human being, diffusion is difficult. So that's why there are some special organs that will be doing the work of that diffusion. So instead of diffusing, they will be rather be doing respiration, excretion, and all other things that small organism cannot do. So meaning is a disadvantage because they cannot do diffusion directly the way smaller organisms will be doing it. So then second disadvantage of complexity is that the oxygen and the food that the complex organism we eat, like human being, will be very slow. Before the food gets to where it's going, it will take time. Just like in the stomach, food will stay for like 6 hours. Unlike the small organisms, that the food will get to the destination very fast. So oxygen and food get slowly to the destination. So the last one, which is excretion. When you look at excretion, it's difficult in complex organism. That means imagine for a man to defecate, so it takes a longer time for the poo, which is the feces, to come out. So unlike that of small organisms, which is just for them to compress their body and the waste we get out of the body. So today we have looked at the levels of organization of life and the complexity. Thanks for listening. Once again, my name is Damilare.